the end game, Adam?
Well, Scott, the Dallas Cowboys are now the 7th team this season to make a head coaching change. And what happened was last week, Jerry Jones and Mike McCarthy had a series of meetings involving the football team itself, the Dallas Cowboys. But at no time in those conversations did the two discuss a contract. And today, the Dallas Cowboys said that the two sides are officially parting ways, with Mike McCarthy set to be able to talk to other teams, and the Chicago Bears and New Orleans Saints both are expected to be interested, and the Dallas Cowboys now launching into a head coaching search a week later than some of the other teams in the league. That means that Bill Belichick is in North Carolina, Mike Vrabel is in New England, and the Cowboys cannot interview coordinators such as Aaron Glenn and Ben Johnson in Detroit and Steve Spagnuolo and Matt Nagy in Kansas City. But they can and will conduct a search here to try to find the next head coach of the Dallas Cowboys. Obviously, it's just new. It's just beginning. We'll see where that brings them. A lot of names floating around out there. I think at some point in time, they could have some level of interest in the Eagles offensive coordinator, Kellen Moore, potentially maybe Jason Witten, an old-time franchise great. But this is very early on, very preliminary, and we'll see ultimately where Jerry Jones goes with this search. But the Cowboys are now in the market for a new head coach.
Adam, thank you very much. We are pleased to be joined now by Hall of Famer and 3-time Super Bowl champion, of course, with the Dallas Cowboys, and that's Troy Aikman. And Troy, when this news comes out, you know this is going to land in your lap, right? When we were in Dallas this year for a couple of games, look, the topic has always been out there about Jerry and Mike and what might happen, and now they've chosen to go in their separate ways. I don't think Mike will be out of a job for too long, but this job's as coveted as any because you're going to run the Dallas Cowboys. In what direction do you think they ought to look?
Well, I thought Mike McCarthy would be the head coach, so this is a bit of a surprise for me today that he's not going to be. And what went into those conversations that Schefter talked about, I'm not exactly sure, but it suggests that there's not a real plan. I mean, and the fact that they haven't had the opportunity to maybe interview a Ben Johnson and some of these others, Aaron Glenn. I think that what Schefter said as far as Kellen Moore being a candidate, that seems logical to me. A guy who has familiarity with the building. He's worked obviously with the Cowboys and with Jerry Jones, and they know each other very well. In fact, when Mike McCarthy got the job, it was told to Mike that Kellen Moore would be the offensive coordinator. So that's how much the Jones family thinks of him. Beyond that, it's hard to imagine. As far as a coveted job, I don't know that that's accurate. I mean, really? I do think the Cowboys are obviously a high-profile team. Whoever is covered or whoever is head coach of that team is certainly going to draw a lot of attention. But I think most football people that take over as a head coach, they want to do it on their terms.
That's fair.
That's hard to do. And it's, if you take a Dan Campbell, for instance, is Dan Campbell if he's with the Dallas Cowboys? It's hard to imagine that he is. It's hard to imagine that a lot of these coaches might be. So I love the Dallas Cowboys. I played there for 12 years. I wish them well. But to say that it's a coveted job, I'm not sure I would necessarily agree with that.
Maybe it's semantics, and let me just be clear. I agree with what you're saying because, Swag, you look at that job, and it's the star, and it's Dallas, and it's all that comes with it. But you're also hamstrung to a degree by the money you've got sunk in a couple of star players, and that you're going to have to pay Mike if you want to keep him. How do you view what that job is?
I agree with Troy. Therein lies, there's a difference in flash and substance.
Cake and icing.
A flash.
Cake and icing.
Yeah, exactly. And that's something we talk about this quite often when we get a chance to sit together and talk. But ultimately, when you look at this job, and I kind of sum this job up in this regard. If the owner is not going to change, are you willing to hire a coach with enough cachet to challenge you on not changing? And it's what's going to be best for the locker room and the guys that's playing on the field. We throw this word distractions around a lot in football. Things are happening, and there's a lot of distractions going on. Distractions are a part of playing in the NFL. That's not singular to any team in the league as far as having distractions. The difference is in Dallas is the guy that makes the decisions creates the distractions. And that is why it's so difficult and why I agree with Troy to say this is a coveted job. You'll take the job because they'll pay you $5-6 million. We human. We understand that. But if you have a plan long-term to win, implement a culture, change the way things are being done, that's something you really have to think about as a coach that's taking this job seriously, knowing that you play it on the margins anyway.
RC, to these points that are being made, because they carry a lot of weight and they make a lot of sense, could that preclude them from getting ultimately a difference-making type of coach?
Well, I do believe it makes it very difficult to get someone who is going to be a culture changer, because that's what normally happens with these teams. When you move on from coaches, you want the culture to be better. You want the chemistry within the locker room to be better, along with the actual X's and O's and the strategic parts of football. That culture is Jerry Jones' culture. So many times when Mike Tomlin comes in and takes over for Coach Cowher in the Pittsburgh Steelers, where the culture was already great, he added his touch to it and he had to make it his own. There is no making the Dallas Cowboys your own as a head coach. It's how do you fall in line and compromise with Jerry Jones being the owner. And to Troy's point, it's a coveted job because it's one of 32. People want to be head coaches in the NFL, and you will have the spotlight and attention on you, but the attention is squarely focused on the general manager and owner most times, and it makes it very difficult to operate in a football-like way.
Jason, they were a rival, we understand. And in the NFC East, everyone's rivals with everyone, which is why I've always loved it. But looking at them from the outside looking in, how did you view their circumstance as it related to Jones and the coach and whatever that was?
I mean, listen, they always had success. I mean, we fought each other hard. It wasn't like we dominated that matchup.
Yeah.
I think we actually lost more of them to the Dallas Cowboys, even though organizationally we have more success. And I do think that Jerry, the way the organization is run, it just feels like that's more the issue than it is the coaching. It feels like, especially this offseason, they didn't make the investment in the free agency. They didn't make the moves necessary to really compete. And all of a sudden now McCarthy is kind of being phased out. But I also wonder, what's happened, because it felt like McCarthy was trending towards being back. That's what it certainly sounded like.
I mean, what has happened? He thought he would.
So what has happened?
And he had support from guys like Parsons that were pretty vocal about it.
So what has happened recently?
I don't know.
Did something happen in those meetings, or does Jerry have a plan that he already knows where he wants to go? Because it feels like you already got this guy coming back. It felt like he was trending there, and all of a sudden it's changed.
I don't think they would have spent the 4 days if there was not a thought that he was going to continue. There was something in those conversations. I've been led to believe that potentially it could have been the length of a contract. Never got into the actual terms of what the money would be, but if the contract was going to be a 2-year deal versus a 5-year deal, was that a no-go for Mike McCarthy, or where does it start? I don't know, but somewhere along the lines, what looked to be a conversation that was going to secure Mike for a deal didn't happen.
And it seems like when it comes to players, Jerry always waits to the last minute. In this case, I guess you got to the last minute. It was supposed to be Tuesday, and it didn't, and now it's not. So he goes in a different direction.
I think coaching matters in the NFL. I think we would all agree. I think coaching matters. Players matter.
See it tonight.
You have to have both, but just bringing in someone, no matter how qualified that coach might be. And I'll reiterate, I think Mike McCarthy is an outstanding football coach. He's proven that in this league. The number of times he's won 10 games or more as a head coach. But you have to empower that head coach.
Yes.
And I think that's been what has been missing in Dallas since Jimmy Johnson walked out the door.
I think we see the impact of coaching tonight with a couple of young guys that spent some time in a place where the ownership, the team I cheered for, was a mess for a long time. And now there was a change there, and the direction of Washington clearly has changed. And look forward to hearing your call. It's going to be a fun game tonight, and look forward to visiting when we're done. It's the Rams and